Welcome to All the Fanfare. My name is Eric Pierce, and today we're talking about Attack of the Clones, Star Wars Episode 2. For those of you that pay close attention to this podcast, you know that I've been talking about the 4-film Christopher Reeve Superman movies for some time now, and I should be talking about those today, but it turns out preparing for a podcast talking about 4 movies is a lot more work than doing a podcast talking about one. So I'm not quite ready to do that. But it is coming sooner than later. It won't be next week, but sooner than later. So if you're holding out for the Christopher Reeves Superman movies, they're coming. Just not yet. Just not today. But today we're talking about Attack of the Clones. I was inspired to do this after the Episode 1, the Phantom Menace podcast, which I quite enjoyed doing. So I said, let's just run through all of the Star Wars prequels. It just gives me an excuse to talk about these movies, talk about Star Wars, to have a legit reason other than to keep interjecting it into everything else I'm talking about. So Attack of the Clones came out in 2002. It has the magnanimous honor of being the first Star Wars film to ever be outgrossed in the year it was released. So Attack of the Clones made roughly $650 million at the box office that year, finishing in third behind the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie and Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. If you're going to lose to a couple films, those are the ones to lose to, but still, it's kind of a black mark. And it continues the theme because Attack of the Clones is the worst prequel movie. It's one of the bottom half Star Wars movies, and we're going to talk a bit about why that is. From the name of the movie, Attack of the Clones is about war and clones, apparently. Coming into this movie, we had a vague idea about the Clone Wars. So in A New Hope, Obi-Wan name drops the Clone Wars, and then that incites like 20 odd years of just feverish wondering, like, what the heck are the Clone Wars? For me personally, the Clone Wars were this magical, unknowable thing, and my imagination ran wild. I never pinned it down to any specific one thing, but the Clone Wars always just raised this sense of awesome possibility within me. And so to see what we got, to say I was crushed by it, that's a fair statement, because it turns out what the Clone Wars actually is. It's a couple things. It's a conflict that was manufactured by Palpatine to give him more power. It's a melodramatic, unbelievable love story. It's two faceless robotic armies locked in a battle that's solely meant to bleed the Jedi. And it's a victim of 25 years of built-up hype and wonder, which is what I was just referring to. I remember in the lead up to this movie, there was a fan trailer put together that showed, it just kind of pieced together footage from all these different movies, almost as a proof of concept. And what that fan did was he showed Jedi basically fighting an army of Boba Fett clones, which wasn't far off the mark. And I don't know if we knew anything about that at that time, but it was super exciting. And I'm not gonna lie, I wish we had got that. The clones we do get are just meh. They're okay. The idea of, and even, clones, yeah, I kind of picture almost like cloned Jedi. Those were the kinds of things. Like, I was thinking, my imagination was running wild, and I was picturing bigger and maybe better. I don't know. I think it's better than what we got, but that's just me, I guess. I know a lot of people love the actual clones we did get. I'm just not as much of a fan of them personally. It's a personal thing, I guess. I don't know, the word clone just raises this idea. It's almost like sci-fi horror. It's a horrific idea. And the clones they're really interchangeable with the droid armies. And obviously these are, as George Lucas likes to remind us, these are movies meant for kids, but nothing that George Lucas put on screen could have matched my dreams and imagination of what the Clone Wars was. But I'm still a little crushed that it ends up just being two faceless armies going head to head. But maybe that's just me. Though the movie did end up falling short of expectations, not just mine, but across the board, I think a lot of fans coming out of The Phantom Menace were crushed, disappointed by what we got. Attack of the Clones did address some of the failings of The Phantom Menace. It sidelined Jar Jar Binks, and even in a sweet bit of revenge, maybe, made him the unwitting accomplice in the downfall of the Republic. It focused less on politics and had more action. Not always a good thing, because the action needs to be good and entertaining and interesting, and sometimes it wasn't in this movie, but downplayed politics in favor of action. No talk of midichlorians at all, and it gave Obi-Wan an even worse haircut than he had in The Phantom Menace. So Homeboy was rocking a sweet looking mullet in this movie, and actually looks worse than the do he was rocking in the first movie. But Attack of the Clones also introduced some of its own issues. Over-reliance on CGI overload. The actors look like they're just kind of in a green screen hell. They're separate from the background. They're standing apart from it. It just doesn't look great watching it now. It turned Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one, into a borderline psychopath, which is a bit of a problem. When are we supposed to like this guy? Because in the first movie, he's this cute, sort of whiny little kid. Not much there to grab onto. In this movie, he's a psychopath. In the third movie, he's a full-on slide to the dark side. So when were we supposed to buy into this character and feel crushed that he goes bad? It should have been in this movie. It should have been in the first two movies, but it doesn't happen. And then in place of politics, Attack of the Clones' love story drags the film down, and it drags it down bad, down into the depths. So to start here, I haven't done this before with any of these pods, but I thought this was interesting because when I was watching the movie, the opening crawl jumped out at me. So I want to read it and just kind of provide some commentary because I found it interesting. So here we go. Opening crawl. There is unrest in the Galactic Senate. So right off the bat, George Lucas sticking with his guns, focusing on politics. The crawl continues. Several thousand solar systems have declared their intentions to leave the Republic. And this is what actually gave me pause and made me want to talk about the crawl, because as many times as I've seen this movie, several thousand solar systems have decided to secede from the Union or from the Republic. That kind of shocked me this time around. I never really noticed it before, and in these prequel films and in the Clone Wars animated series, it always feels like it's just a handful of rogue systems, and really you're dealing with, they're not systems, the Trade Federation and the Techno Union and the Banking Clan. They're not systems, but they provide the armies, the materials for war. But it always felt like it was just a handful of rogue systems, but turns out there's thousands of them, and it's been in front of my face this whole time, but I've never really noticed it before, I guess. And here's the funny thing, though, because apparently in this Republic, nobody has any kind of standing army, which is why the Republic needs to create their own army. It's also why the Trade Federation's lousy droids can just run ramshot over everybody. They're the big threat in the galaxy, because literally nobody else has any kind of fighting force. So, I don't know. Just interesting stuff. The crawl continues. The separatist movement under the leadership of the mysterious Count Dooku. I'll be real. Even as an adult, Count Dooku sounds like a silly name. It reminds me of like Count Chocula, like that kind of like comedic villainy. more funny than dangerous. I think maybe Dooku, I don't know. Dooku sounds different now because we're used to hearing it for 20 years, but when you just think about Count Dooku, it's a silly name. Anyway, the crawl continues. Count Dooku is made difficult. Let me just reread the whole sentence. The separatist movement under the leadership of the mysterious Count Dooku has made it difficult for the limited number of Jedi Knights to maintain peace and order in the galaxy. So, this is an interesting... I don't know, I don't quite get this. The separatist movement has made difficult for the number... This doesn't make sense to me, I guess. So, we have less... The separatist movement is about solar systems leaving the Republic. So now they're there are less member states in the Republic, and somehow that's become more difficult for the Jedi to govern or to police. That doesn't really add up. It seems like less systems should be easier to maintain order of than more systems, because the Jedi number of Jedi staying static. So, but for some reason, there's even more conflict. Unless maintaining peace and order really means something else, and I think it kind of does. I think there's some interesting subtext in this movie that I don't know that's intentional, but when you watch it and you think about it, it's kind of there staring in your face. We'll talk about some of that stuff. Let's see here. The crawl continues. Senator Amidala, former Queen of Naboo, is returning to the Galactic Senate to vote on the critical issue of the creation of an army of the Republic to assist the overwhelmed Jedi. And that's the end of the crawl. Queen Amidala. So Queen Amidala is now Senator Amidala, which feels like a demotion. Later on in the movie, we learned that apparently on Naboo, queens only serve 2 terms, which just is another indication that Naboo is a weird place. The other thing, the whole politics of this movie is built around this. Again, episode 1 is called Phantom Menace. This movie is basically a Phantom Menace because all this is drummed up to create this conflict so that the Jedi can be wiped out. That's the big plot here, to get Palpatine power and remove his opposition. That's really what's happening. But it's just interesting that, again, I don't understand how this becomes a Jedi issue if there's less systems or not. And in fact, if there's systems that want to leave the Republic, why not let them go? What's the harm? Why does it automatically mean war if the separatists want to go? It just doesn't add up. You really just look at what the movie's saying it's about and what's happening, and then logically thinking about it. None of this stuff adds up. Maybe these are Palpatine's shadow games, but again, I think people like to claim Palpatine's playing 4D chess when really all of his machinations are just the product of chance and luck, or maybe call it the will of the Force, whatever, but none of it makes sense. Anywho, let's talk about politics for a minute. So this movie starts with the opening assassination attempt on Padme, and shortly after that we get a scene of the head Jedi, the master of master Jedi masters. Does that make any sense? Anyway, I'm talking about like Mace Windu, Yoda, Conehead guy, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and maybe a couple others. They're meeting with the devil himself, Palpatine, in his lair. And again, Mace Windu says, talking about the separatists, if they break away, we're keepers of the peace, not soldiers. And my questions here are, what are you protecting the Republic from, or who? And why does less systems mean more work for the Jedi? There's just this logical fallacy here that I can't quite get over. And none of it makes sense to me. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe these movies aren't supposed to make sense, but it does not make sense. And as I was watching this, the question that kept coming to my mind was, are the separatists in the right? If you think about what happens in The Phantom Menace, Naboo gets blockaded by the Trade Federation, and the Republic has their hands tied. They send a couple Jedi to investigate, and that's the extent of it. And by the end of the movie, the Trade Federation is brought to justice, but only because of the heroism of these 2 Jedi and Princess or Queen Amidala and the Gungan army. But that movie had to deal with all this stuff happens because the Republic is corrupt, because the bureaucracy is ineffective. And so here we have these separatists that want to move away, that want to get out of the Republic because of this corruption and ineffectiveness. At least that's what they're claiming. And I would probably believe of these thousands of systems, probably most of them are probably unhappy with it. It's hard to judge the systems on the actions of the Trade Federation and the stuff, the people with the armies, people doing the villainy. But I think we're meant to look at the separatists as the bad guys, but I think they have some valid gripes with the Republic, and I think a better, more nuanced story would have explored this angle a lot more than what we get. George Lucas and the script sniffs around a little bit, and one of the more interesting parts of this movie is when Obi-Wan ends up imprisoned on Geonosis, and Dooku comes to his cell and just lays the truth on him. And Obi-Wan doesn't believe him because whatever reason doesn't believe him. I don't understand that. I guess I get it. He doesn't want to believe him because the truth that the Republic is under the control of the Dark Lord of the Sith, it's unfathomable, and that threatens his worldview. And the scene's just funny to me because Dooku's just telling the truth about everything he's saying there. I wish that Dooku had been more of a third party, I guess. Maybe less out and out villainous. And I feel like this was an opportunity to really kind of explore those. It's weird. These movies are political, but they get dragged down in the minutia of politics without any of the interesting parts of politics. So we're told that these separatists don't want to leave the Republic. We don't know why. We're not shown why. And Dooku is making these sweeping statements about the Republic and the organizations Obi-Wan's supporting being corrupt. And Obi-Wan says, "No thanks, I'm fine where I am. I'm not interested in your olive branch shoved up your butt." And at that point, Dooku just like, okay, well, I guess fine. I'm gonna go be a bad guy now. I wish that there had been some more nuance there. Granted, that's not really what these movies are about, but I feel like with maybe this is my problem for asking for this, but in a more mature telling of the story, I think there's more nuance in this, and it's not so black and white. But again, that's not really what Star Wars is, so we take it for what it is, and we enjoy it for what it is. Like in The Phantom Menace, there are a lot of discussions of treaties in this movie. And just like in The Phantom Menace, it's not exactly clear what the treaty is meant for. I think in the case of this movie, the discussion of the treaty has to do with the separatists want to go off and do their own thing, and I guess form a treaty with the Republic as a we're not going to attack you, you don't attack us kind of deal, which seems like just let them go. Like, I don't understand why they have to be united in this Republic, and we don't get any of those details. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Like, why does this matter? Why is it important? I think hand in hand with the politics is the Jedi, and you kind of, between the politics, the corruption in the Republic, much of which is either Palpatine inspired or Palpatine manipulated, or he's just kind of taking advantage of. But hand in hand with that, we're seeing the Jedi supposedly kind of like at their peak, but really you start to question why these guys are, why they're the way they are. And you really kind of see them in a different light. I think, at least I did coming into this viewing, or during this viewing, I was kind of taken by the sheer arrogance and gall of the Jedi. It's kind of breathtaking. They act like pompous know-it-alls. When Padme suggests that Dooku is behind the attempts on her life, and turns out she's right. The two Jedi Masters, Ki-Adi-Mundi, he's the Conehead guy, and Mace Windu, played by Samuel L. Jackson, they shoot her down with no prejudice. They're just like, nope, you're wrong. They tell her Dooku is a political idealist, not a murderer. And then they go further. Mace says he was once a Jedi. He couldn't assassinate anyone. It's not in his character. So basically, they're claiming that once you're a Jedi, you're always a Jedi, and Jedi don't roll like that. Which is interesting because you've got the lurking presence of the dark side. Like, they know the dark side's a real thing. They know there's Sith about. Sith are running amok. But they don't seem to. It's interesting. It's almost like they're blind to the possibility that a Jedi could ever break bad. And the arrogance just is shocking, frankly. I also wonder, again, I mentioned this during the Phantom podcast. What the heck does the Jedi of this era do? They just kind of sit around and take meetings. In this case, they go to see Palpatine a couple times, but otherwise, they're sitting in the top of their literal ivory tower, just sitting in a circle, dispensing orders, not really lifting a finger, even when it seems like a good idea, even when it seems like the Republic is imperiled, like stuff's going down. It's again, it's like they cannot even fathom a problem that a single Jedi on his or her own, couldn't overcome. And so they dispense a Jedi and his apprentice. They did it in the Phantom Menace. They do it here to deal with these problems, and then they don't deal with any problems on their own. They're very inward looking, focused on the Jedi, training the next generation of Jedi, dealing with Jedi things. I don't see a lot of, they talk about being guardians of the peace and stuff. I don't see a lot of that going on. And granted, we're seeing a few scenes. It's hard. You can't totally judge what maybe is going on off screen, but I'm just saying, this is the general vibe they have. We see it again with the Jedi librarian lady, the crotchety old lady, when Obi-Wan's trying to find Kamino, and it's not in the system. And she has the gall to say, if it doesn't appear in our records, it doesn't exist, which is just the height of arrogance, and it's just kind of a shocking statement, but this is what the Jedi of this era are like. And what's interesting is during this movie, Yoda and Mace Windu talk about how the Jedi's ability to use the Force is diminished due to, I guess, the presence of the dark side, or the dark side, its proximity is clouding their ability to see. Yoda can't see into the future like he maybe could usually. Things are just cloudy, and they say their ability to use the Force is diminished. So, if that's true, does it make the Jedi more or less arrogant that they're acting all-knowing when in fact they are not, and they're just kind of guessing and going with hunches? And I don't know. I kind of feel like it's more arrogant to pretend that you know everything when you know that you actually don't know everything. There's two relationships in this movie, and both of them are super problematic. And I think the failings of the prequels ultimately lie in the characters and the relationships of the central three, which is Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme. And we're never given the opportunity to buy into them and care about them really as characters. And that's because they don't, there's nothing there to grab onto. They don't make you, in the case of Obi-Wan and Anakin, there's nothing there to make you think these guys are actually good friends, to buy into their friendship, to want them to continue that friendship. So then when they later come to blows, it's tragic only in that, you know, we know it's coming, but like, I don't feel all that broken up about when Obi-Wan and Anakin fight, because I never bought in their relationship that much to begin with. Let's just talk about their relationship. This should be the height of their relationship, the apex of their friendship. These guys are supposed to be great friends. There's nothing in this movie to indicate that's true. You can't see it. Anakin refers to Obi-Wan as his mentor, and he calls him great, and the closest thing he has to a father. But Obi-Wan is a jerk. He's constantly cutting down Anakin. He refers to him constantly as my young apprentice, my young Padawan. When Anakin's done something really stupid, he calls him my very young apprentice. He tells him stuff like, your senses aren't that attuned. When Padme and Anakin show up on Geonosis to try and rescue Obi-Wan, he's completely ungrateful about it and just giving Anakin crap about it. He's constantly lobbing lectures at him, talking about the untrustworthiness of politicians, the importance of his lightsaber, to be patient, to think, all these things. Obi-Wan is a butthead, and the only excuse I see for him is maybe this is the strain of raising, quote unquote, raising the chosen one, like to know that he has the fate of the galaxy kind of in his hands. But at the same time, Obi-Wan is just a jerk. He totally is. But for all of that, I think his heart's in the right place. Anakin is far worse. You have to wonder what happened to him in the past 10 years between Phantom Menace and this movie. He's openly insubordinate. He's a whiner. He's always complaining. He talks about being more powerful than Obi-Wan. When he refers to him as master all the time, it always seems kind of like grudging, like he doesn't really see him as his master, but he has to call him that. He's comfortable acting in ways that are completely antithetical to the Jedi belief system. This dude's willing to lie. He admits to feeling fear. He goes completely nuclear when the Tusken Raiders, when his mother ends up dead because they abducted her. Super attached to Padme. All of this is not Jedi behavior, and it's also it makes it hard as watching this movie to just buy into him as a character, to really want good things for him and for their relationship, Obi-Wan and Anakin. I don't like either of these characters, frankly, and I say that as someone who I like Ewan McGregor's portrayal of Obi-Wan in these movies. I like Obi-Wan better when he's off on his own, because when he's with Anakin, at least in this movie, he's just riding his ass the whole time, and it's hard to watch. And there's a scene where when they first meet with Padme in her luxury suite kind of situation, and Anakin and Obi-Wan sit on the couch to talk to Padme, and Obi-Wan says, "We'll protect you," and Anakin says, "We'll find out who did this to you, who's trying to kill you." And then they just have this very public spat. And it's so unprofessional and so uncomfortable. And like I don't like these guys together at all. And it makes me uncomfortable when they're together. And these guys are supposed to be best friends and great friends. And I feel like if they had nailed the relationship in this movie, it would be a lot more tragic when they fall apart and go at each other in the next movie. And that's just how I feel about it, I guess. Let's talk about the other relationship, and that's the Bantha in the corner, the Padme Anakin relationship. In one word, woof. What a train wreck. I just have to know, like, I know there's a bad boy thing, and I know it's real. Like, there are some girls who love the bad boy. I don't know if they feel like they can rehabilitate him or what it is exactly, but I generally do not understand what Padme sees in this guy. He leers at her openly. He tells her he dreams about her. He whines to her and complains about how unfair and how rough his life is. He gets openly hostile with her when she rightfully calls him a Padawan in public. He slaughters an entire village and tells her about it. And all this, it's just red flags galore. And she's not, I don't know. I can't, it's almost like something is pulling them together that can't be explained or overcome by anything else, and that thing that I'm referring to is called plot, because the story dictates these two end up together, which is going to overrule any sense of Padme saying, "This guy's crazy, I need to get as far away from him as I can," because they're fated to end up together, and so they're going to end up together even if Anakin is written really poorly and you don't like him, like we do in this movie. We also, so during their courting, which is hands down the worst part of this movie, and in fact, I would probably say it's maybe the worst part of all Star Wars, the Anakin Padme courting scenes. They're awful. We get a scene literally with them frolicking in a field. Really, George? I feel like George Lucas, I love he's a visionary, and we wouldn't have Star Wars without him, so mad props for that. But I feel like George has never really had a relationship, but I know he's been in relationships. He's been married. I think he should know what love is, but he has a hard time depicting it because, man, there's nothing romantic about what's happening in these scenes. I mean, listen, later on they have the fireplace scene where Padme's wearing a super skimpy black S&M leather outfit, and Anakin says stuff like, "You're in my very soul, tormenting me." I mean, this is so melodramatic. It's bodice ripper level dialogue, and it's awful. It drags the whole movie down. And by the way, I do have to comment on that dress and that scene by the fireplace. If Padme has no intention of going any further with Anakin, why does she dress so provocatively? And it makes me wonder if she's secretly a Sith plant. I know she's not, but wouldn't that have been a plot twist to really push Anakin over? Speaking of plots, I want to spend a couple minutes talking about the assassination subplot because it's vital, it's integral to the story, and then it's kind of just dropped. And it's also like all of Palpatine's plots. It's kind of ridiculous, let's say. So we have Zam. Her name's Zam Weasel, or Zam Wessel. I think it's Zam Wessel. She's a shapeshifter. I don't know if it's even appropriate to call her a she because she's a shapeshifter. So don't know what the gender is, but most of the scenes she presents as a female. So I'm going to call her she. Anyway, Zam plants an explosive on the landing platform that kills Padme's decoy in the opening of the film. Shortly after that, Jango Fett gives her some poisonous insects to try again. And we discover through the movie that let's just break down this plot goes. So Zam makes an attempt on Padme's life twice. Zam has been subcontracted by Jango Fett, who's a bounty hunter. I guess he's not an assassin, he's a bounty hunter, so maybe that's why he doesn't try and do it himself. So Jango Fett subcontracts Zam. Jango works for Count Dooku, so the orders to assassinate Padme came from Count Dooku to Jango to Zam, and then it goes even further. Dooku's working for Palpatine / Darth Sidious. Now, the order to assassinate, we're not 100% sure where that comes from. We do know from this movie that Newt Gunray, the Trade Federation viceroy, wants Padme's head on a platter, and that's kind of that's his request to join the Separatists. That's what he wants to happen. So it seems like he's the one who instigates the assassination attempts, but all this is essentially manipulated by big brain Palpatine, who has conspired things to force Padme and Anakin into close contact because he knows Anakin's in love with her. He's like 19 at the time of this movie, so he's raging with hormones. Obviously, he couldn't know, or probably doesn't know, that Padme is going to dress all provocative around him, but maybe he can see that with his dark side powers. But in any case, that's the general idea here is all of these things that happen, this multi-leveled assassination ploy is only meant to get these two together. Although I do wonder if the assassination attempts had been successful and Padme had been killed. I think it's kind of a bonus thing because either Padme and Anakin spend a bunch of time together and he falls in love with her and gets attached, which is then a lever that Palpatine can use to pull him closer to the dark side. Or if Padme actually dies, then Anakin is going to be crushed and easier to pull to the dark side. So I guess it's a win-win for Palpatine. But it's still just the mechanics of these nested plots that seem very precarious. This is Palpatine working. This is how he deals. I'll talk about Zam for a second. The shapeshifter assassin. It seems like a genius no-brainer move. Like if you hire a trained killer who can literally look like anybody, that would be the best assassin ever. Unfortunately, Zam Wessel is the dumbest shapeshifter in history because when the Jedi are hot on her tail, she ducks into a bar to hide and makes no attempt to change her appearance. I don't understand why she just doesn't hide in a corner, make herself look like a Gungan or I don't know, something, a Sullustan, a dude, and then just walk out the door. That would be the easy thing. Instead, for reasons that I don't understand, she tries to get the drop on Obi-Wan, who's standing at the bar waiting for her, essentially, and he cuts her arm off, her hand anyways. None of that makes any sense. Why does Jango Fett use a dart to kill her, which leaves a physical artifact that can be traced? I mean, there was the world of Star Wars where everything else is laser bolts. Why doesn't he just headshot her from the balcony with his laser rifle? And if that shot's maybe too far, dude has a rocket strapped to his back. Why not just fire that bad boy off and maybe take a couple Jedi with her? I don't know. Doesn't make sense. The only world in which it makes sense is to leave a plot thread for Obi-Wan to follow and then uncover the mystery. And that's unfortunately what this is. The dart's a MacGuffin, and it's a strangely placed one that makes no sense when you really think about it. So sorry if I just ruined the movie for you, but that's what it is. And then coming out of these assassination attempts, Mace Windu says Padme will be safer on Naboo, which, if you recall from The Phantom Menace, Naboo has like a 12-man security team. Not the safest place in the galaxy. I don't know why they think she would be safe there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he issues this decree while they're standing in the Jedi Temple with several thousand Jedi around. Are you telling me there's not like a safe house in the Jedi room where they could just stash her for a little while and make sure there's Jedi keep an eye on her and that she wouldn't be safer there? Makes no sense. I don't get it. Don't bring logic to these movies because you'll be disappointed. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter. This whole subplot, assassination thing, the movie itself stops caring about these assassination ploys once Anakin and Padme are forced together, because ultimately that's the goal of them, is to force these two characters together. And so once they are, the assassination stuff just falls by the wayside. I don't know why George didn't give us another attempt on her life when the two of them together. If you want to talk about building romance and stakes and making us care about these characters, and even better, give Padme a reason to care about Anakin and a way to see him as something other than the boy she grew up knowing, or the little boy she once knew. Have an attack on her life where Anakin is the hero, Anakin saves her, and she can then look at him as something other than the boy she used to know, the little slave boy from Tatooine she used to know. That seems like a no-brainer to me. Why do we not have that scene? I don't get it. That's just, again, a missed opportunity. There are some, I hate to end on a down note, so I'm not going to. There are, despite this being one of the weaker Star Wars movies, there are a number of moments I dig. Scenes, sometimes they're full scenes, sometimes they're just a look or something that I like in this movie. I'm just going to run through a brief list of them, share with you. The first one is when Zam sends her bugs in to kill Padme, and the Jedi come busting in, which, by the way, talking about Jedi arrogance, Anakin jumps on her bed and pulls out his lightsaber and dissects these two insects with Padme sleeping. And it's not hard to imagine him taking her knee off or something when he's doing it, because it's all very fast. So it's just kind of funny. That's not my favorite moment. My favorite moment is when Obi-Wan notices the droid hanging out outside the window, and then he just jumps through the window, crashes through the glass, and grabs onto it. I can remember when I first saw it, it just felt like excitingly abrupt and just visceral. And I think part of what I react to is because everything in this movie is so CGI, this feels real because he's smashing through glass. The glass is going in all directions. It's not CGI, that's real. And it just felt surprising. Because, think about it too, like Coruscant, they're like thousands of levels above the ground. A fall is definitely fatal. And he does not hesitate. Jumps through the glass. I don't know. I love it. It's a little scene, but I love it. Relate to that. I love all the stuff of Coruscant at night. during the speeder chase in particular, we get to see what the city actually looks like. It feels like a cleaner version of Blade Runner, like on steroids. Everything's big and vibrant and bright. You've got all this speeder traffic, and it's, you're like miles above the ground, and there's speeders everywhere. I just feel like you get a really good sense of how big Coruscant actually is, and I don't know, I just really like it. Let's see, what else do I have here? Stuff I dig. Palpatine and Anakin. So it's funny / sad, maybe, that the best relationship in this movie is the one between the Dark Lord in hiding and his unwitting apprentice. But there's actually warmth and emotion between these characters, and you can actually, looking at them together and then comparing how Anakin is with Obi-Wan, you totally see why Anakin is drifting into Palpatine's influence and why he looks up to him. It's clear that Palpatine's been grooming Anakin for these last 10 years. And outside of kind of the ickiness of that whole thing and the fact that Palpatine has motivations that are dark and twisted, it actually feels like he cares for Anakin, which I know he doesn't. He sees him as a pawn. But there's just their relationship feels more fatherly and mentorish than what he has with Obi-Wan, which feels almost more like a older brother that I despise relationship. And Anakin actually listens to him, and he's respectful. I don't know. It's just, you can see how he ends up in his clutches, and that's really well done. I like all those. There's only the one scene, but I do like it. I like the moment when Obi-Wan meets Jango Fett on Kamino. This is a nicely written. There's subtext in the scene. People aren't saying exactly what they think or know. Jango's probably thinking, oh crap, there's this Jedi that I just saw hanging out by Zane Weasel's body, and now he's on my doorstep in my home, my apartment. And Obi-Wan is suspicious this is the bounty hunter, and we think that he actually sees Jango Fett's armor through the open door into the, I don't know, bedroom or whatever that is. So there's this tension in the scene, and Obi-Wan's hinting around it and asking, like, oh, do you travel much? Have you been to Coruscant? And they're kind of dancing around each other. It's just a good scene. It's not like super well written, but with some of the scenes, some of the dialogue is so poor, especially like the stuff with Anakin and Padme. Something like this rise above, in my opinion. The exterior stuff on Kamino, basically it's raining, and I guess I'm a simple man, but I just love the rain scenes, and then that leads into Obi-Wan and Jango fighting in the rain on Kamino. I talked about that quite a bit in the Phantom Menace pod, so I'm not gonna talk about it here, but I do love that fight. Coming out of that fight, I love the seismic charges in the asteroid field when Obi-Wan's chasing Jango Fett. And the best thing about those is the pregnant pause between when the charge goes off. There's the flash of light, and then you hear the woof, the explosion, and it's just obliterating all these asteroids. Just a great moment. What else do I have here? When Mace Windu leaps off the balcony when his robe is on fire. So it's, he comes out on the balcony, puts his lightsaber to Jango's throat, tells Dooku this party's over. All that stuff's cool, but my favorite little moment there is when he leaps in the air and Jango's shooting his flamethrower at him, and he falls like 50 feet or something to the ground, and his robe's smoking the whole way. Just a great visual. Speaking of visuals, I love the way the Republic gunships look. I love how they fly. They kind of skid through the air, swing their tail ends around. They feel like science fiction helicopters. They're one of the cooler vehicles we get out of the prequels for sure. Because I'm not a huge Anakin fan, I really love it when cocky Anakin charges Dooku and eats a face full of Force lightning and then just gets tossed into the corner like a puppet. with its strings cut. I don't know. I guess, yeah, he's just so cocky that I appreciate seeing him put in his place. Uh, and I'm not like pro Dooku, but I do love the smile on Dooku's face right before he slices Obi-Wan and sends him to the ground. He just looks so happily evil when it happens. And I may write an article just so I can use a screen cap of the moment when it happens, because it makes me laugh. And the last one I have here, big moments for me. I don't love this moment as much as I did, but when I first saw it, when Yoda comes hobbling around the corner to face Dooku, when he pulled out his lightsaber, that was a real whoa moment. I legitimately didn't think or know he had a lightsaber. It didn't seem like something he would do. It felt like he was more kind of like out of his prime, wizened old man. So when he pulls out the lightsaber, it was a real moment. Still maintained some of that whoa factor, but watching him frog jump around, it just kind of seems kind of goofy now. So that's why that one's a asterisk on my list of moments I dig. In summary, and let's wrap this baby up. In summary, all in all, I think Attack of the Clones is the worst of the George Lucas Star Wars movies, which is really saying something when you think about the Phantom Menace and how we were thinking about that movie coming out of it. Like, who would have thunk that it could get worse, but it does. And it's strange because you can see the Phantom Menace, you can see Attack of the Clones almost as a course correction to the Phantom Menace in some ways. Some of the complaints, like the fact that the Phantom Menace is slow and doesn't have much action. There's a ton of action scenes in Attack of the Clones, but unfortunately a lot of them feel less impactful or interesting. For instance, the droid factory scene where Anakin and Padme it's basically like going through a video game level. It just feels overly long and not interesting. And again, over-reliance on CGI. I would just say in general, like a lot of things in this movie just sort of happen that have no bearing on anything other than to have them happen. Like an example, the speeder chase when Obi-Wan and Anakin fly through the power converters or power couplings and get shocked with purple lightning and then go on their merry way. Like the speeder doesn't crash or anything. It doesn't slow them down. It doesn't impair them in any way. So why does it happen? The only purpose for that scene is so that Obi-Wan can yell at Anakin again. That's the only thing that comes out of that scene, or that particular like little sequence of the scene. Anything and everything going on with C-3PO on Geonosis is a waste of time, and it's bad slapstick. And I admit I laughed when I saw a lot of it the first time, but when you watch it again and again, it's just goofy. It just doesn't do anything. It's not adding anything to the story. The love story we talked about a little bit, or a lot, I guess. It's hokey. It drags the movie down to its level, and most damning of all, it's so much worse than the Phantom Menace's politics. Like I'd rather watch the political stuff than any more of the Anakin Padme romance. It's just crazy to me that you have these poorly written scenes that are meant to get these two together, and they're slow and boring in this movie, stacked with action scenes, when again, why not just make an attempt on Padme's life while Anakin is her only protector, and then she starts to see him differently? It seems like a no-brainer. I don't know. All due respect to Christopher Lee, but a geriatric Sith is a lot less exciting than a demon-looking Darth Maul. I wish they had brought Maul back for this movie. I just imagine the fight at the end of this movie, instead of Dooku versus Obi-Wan and Anakin, it's Darth Maul versus Obi-Wan and Anakin, and they both Anakin and Obi-Wan would have extra motivation for revenge. This is the guy that killed Qui-Gon Jinn, who was going to be Anakin's surrogate father, and he's he's important to Obi-Wan too. It's his mentor. That's his guy. So and of course, then you could really get more of the 2-on-1 action going, and I don't know. I just like Darth Maul, so I would have loved to have seen him in this. Dooku is interesting. I would have preferred him kind of more of a statesman character, I think, with maybe ambiguous goals and objectives, but that's not what we got. That's going to be it for this week's episode of the podcast. I'll be back next week talking with Simon Dillon about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Super excited to have that conversation with him and to share it with all of you. I have lots of thoughts about myself, and Simon is a cinephile with an encyclopedic knowledge of film and also just a funny guy, so should be a great conversation. If you like the pod, head over to allthefanfare.com, check out some of the long-form articles, sign up for a membership for only $3 a month to gain access to exclusive content, and until next week, peace.